Hello everybody, thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry I couldn't make it all the way to Myanmar, but I sent you guys my warmest greetings from sunny California. The talk I'm going to be giving today is mostly related on research I've been doing during my PhD at Berkeley with Professor Sally Thompson. I actually prepared a handout for you guys to have access to if you want, if you're interested in more details on the methods. Also, please get in touch with me by email if you want. I'll actually love to be in touch with you and to start a discussion. My email is going to be displayed on the presentation at the end. So I'm interested in building information bridges between the different actors of the micro-hydropower sector using information technology. You might wonder why this is important. Well, Nepal actually provides a very good case study to illustrate that need. So Nepal, as you probably know, has a very high hydropower potential because of the Himalayas and the very steep mountain slopes. It has favorable hydrology, and the grid doesn't provide electricity to the majority of the population. Actually, even the electricity it provides is of fairly low quality. And at the same time, you have a very vibrant micro-hydropower sector that provides electricity to 200,000 households by now, and they've been around for about 50 years with very good institutions, local technology, local manufacturing capacity, etc. But at the same time, there's about 10 million people that don't have access to electricity, so the 200,000 households is not a lot compared to the needs. And even in 50 years, micro-hydropower has not reached the scale that it should have in Nepal. And one of the reasons that we think it is the case is because of the gap between the local communities and the centralized experts. So on the one hand, you have the remote communities where people know their communities well, they know their institutions, they know how much people are willing to pay for electricity, how much wages are. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have people that live in Kathmandu that are engineers, that run funding agencies, that provide subsidies, that are policymakers. Those people are very far away from each other in Nepal. And since the road network is fairly poor, it's very hard for them to get in touch and to share information. So that's the purpose of the tool. So we use internet and web technologies to basically collect data from the communities and build a bridge between the two actors. So satellite data could fairly easily collect quantitative data from the community, like for example stream flow and topography. And nowadays, many people have access to smartphones and web-enabled cell phones. So you could collect data from local community with that, like economic data, for example, that you cannot measure with satellite data. And then the tool does the calculations and sends back to the local community the design information that they need in order to go to funding agency to ask for grants and funding, and to connect them with experts. And at the same time, the information is compiled into a large-scale map in order to provide information on the experts and the policymakers in Kathmandu on where these communities are, where hydropower is the most favorable. Okay, so now I'm going to turn to the tool to do a live demo. So bear with me, I'll be right back on another screen. Okay, so you could access the tool from on the internet. You could access it from any web browser or smartphone that is connected to the internet. Anything with a screen, basically, that you could connect to internet, you could use to access the tool. It's composed of a map here. There you go. This map and an information tab. Now, if you're a local community and you're interested in building or designing a micro-hydropower infrastructure in your community, you should click on the local designer map tab, which is what I've clicked here. Then what you do, you zoom on the map until you find your community. Let's consider this community, for example. You click on it, the tool will zoom in and display a few options of where to build the infrastructure. So these options have been optimized using topography from remote sensing sources, from satellites. I'll talk a little bit more about the algorithm later, but you could see that it works a little. You could see that it works by clicking on here the existing schemes. So this displays known infrastructure that have been recorded by the AEPC in their renewable energy data book. So here you have two here, for example, one here, another one here. You could see that the location corresponds approximately. Now it's not exactly the same location, because the optimization is based on other criteria. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but there are a lot of local criteria that also affect the location of the schemes. But roughly it works. So here it's almost the same place. Here it's also fairly similar. Well, there's nothing here, but here it's fairly similar. So it works. Now let's go back to this community. Let's say I'm interested in this specific scheme that looks very well. Let's click on it. This one, you could click on it. Then you scroll down on the information tab and you have a whole bunch of information, for instance, stream flow. So one thing that the tool does is estimates the stream flow locally where it's not measured by gauges. So here it estimates the stream flow right here. And the way they do that is by using several different models. So what you could do is click on this tab here, and that gives you the actual gauges. So where the data is available. Let's find one, blue dots, run this here, for example. If you hover on it, you get stream flow distribution. So that's on the right-hand side of the screen now. So you have the dashed line, which is the measured flow. So this is the flow that's measured by the gauge at this location. Then the green line is the method, the flow that you would get by applying the method that's promoted right now in Nepal, which is the medium irrigation project. And the way this method works is that you go there on a day in spring, in April, when it's supposed to be low flow. You measure the flow, then you assume it's low flow, and you multiply it by regional factor. And the problem with this method is that you have to assume that the flow you are measuring the specific day is the lowest flow you could get. And of course, it's very rarely the case. So that's why it's overestimated often. Now, the two other methods are the ones that are included in this tool. The red one is a statistical method based on surrounding gauges. And the blue one is a process-based method that accounts for the hydrological process a little better and is mostly based on remote sensing data. So both of them work. The blue one is probably better for other places where there is fewer gauges than in Nepal. And the red one is more adapted to Nepal, probably because it really accounts for the local data of the place. Okay, so now going back to the schemes that we're interested in here. So we talked about the hydrology, the water. Now let's talk about the economics. You cannot actually predict anything economic using remote sensing data. It's really difficult. Satellites cannot measure people. So what this tool does is that it's able to collect local information of the economics. So here, for example, if you look at the consumption, which is important because if you cannot feed the electricity you produce to the grids, then the local demand is very important for your scheme. So here I put the average consumption in Nepal, which is 100 watt per household. But if your community consumes more, you could increase it here. So for example, you could say community consumes twice more than the average. And by changing the parameters here, it would change all the metrics here, which I will talk about later. So you could change all these parameters and apply what you think is more suited locally. Then you could submit it, and then it will send information to the tool, which will include it in their in the tool. It will hard write it in the tool and save it to your local community after some basic quality control. Now, once you set all the economic parameters, you could actually look at the information on your scheme. So you have the economics, the demand curve and the supply curve, and the price and the capacity at equilibrium, the optimal. And you could look how much your scheme costs, what is the optimal size, how many people it can serve, how much money you can make. All this kind of thing is accessible here. For this specific scheme. So if you're from a local community and you're interested in getting subsidies or getting funded or attracting some local experts, you could actually gather all this information and send them up to them in order to get your scheme funded. So that's the main advantage for the local community. Now the second tab here is mostly for the other side of the spectrum, so for the experts and the policymakers, everybody else that is in Kathmandu and that has no access to the local communities. And what they're interested in is to have a map to find out where it's the best to go to build micro hydropower, to design policy or to invest money or stuff like that. So you click on that. Let's get rid of the data here. And it gives you a color map. So this is, right now, it's only the site characteristics, so population density is not so interesting. But you could switch, for example, to the case of isolated schemes. So here you don't have a grid. You have the design flow, but let's say you're interested in costing in a building where it's the least cost. So you click on the cost. And that will give you a color code, a colored map of the cost per kilowatt hour of micro hydropower. So it's the least expensive or it's the lightest in this case. Or you could also do it for based on the tariff. So which tariff will allow cost recovery. And now you're interested in having the lowest tariff as possible in order for it to be accessible for people. So again, it's the lightest colors, etc. Now, if you're forward-looking and you believe that the grid will be accessible anytime soon near your community, and you believe that there is going to be some feeding tariff possibilities, so you could actually sell all your electricity to the grid, you could click on this case, so the grid-connected scheme. And if you're interested in how much money you can make, you could click on the return on investment. And now the darkest regions will be the places where it will be the most profitable to build micro hydropower if you have access to the grid. So these ones are the places where you have the most physical potential, because if you could feed it to the grid, then it's not limited by the local demand. So there might be nobody living there, but you can make a lot of electricity. Okay, so that was the tool. Now let's go back to the presentation. Okay, so a couple last slides. So the first I'm going to talk about the topographic placement algorithm. So how does the tool do to actually localize the infrastructure in the community? So satellite data can provide us with rasters, with pictures, where each pixel basically is the altitude of that particular point. Then with very well-known algorithms, you could find out where the rivers are using this information. And then you select the pixels that are below the maximum altitude of the river and within the community. So these are the pixels where you could actually bring water to. And within these pixels, you rule out the pixels that don't have a nice slope for micro hydropower. So ideal slope are between 0.2 and 1. Some more details are on the handouts about that. So you basically rule out all the pixels that are not between 0.2 and 1 in slope. Then you find the pixel that has the maximum slope. And that is within 2 kilometers of a stream, so along an elevation contour, because you don't want a canal to be more than 2 kilometers. Then you extract the elevation profile along the direction of the maximum slope on this pixel. And using a very simple algorithm based on the maximization of the head, you could find out what is the maximum length of the penstock. So where you should place your forebay and where you should place your powerhouse along this elevation profile. And then you follow the elevation contour from the forebay until you reach the river, and there you go. You have mapped your canal. So you do that for several promising steep pixels, and you have several options. So on this map, for example, I'll display 3 options. So you have the canals in light blue and the penstocks in red. So that's a very nice algorithm. You could design very quickly on a very large scale a lot of infrastructure, but it's not perfect. It cannot predict exactly the location of existing plants simply because the optimization is only based on topography. It does not take into account other local aspects. So this is a very telling example. So it's an actual scheme located in Dalidak district in Nepal. So the actual plant is represented below to the left in a solid black line, and the plants predicted by the tool are displayed more to the right in dashed lines. You notice that all the predicted plants are fairly close from the existing plant, but not exactly at the same location. And the reason here is pretty simple: is that all the very favorable locations are on the other side of the stream compared to where the community is and where the road is. So building them would necessitate building bridges, which is expensive. And so they ended up choosing a location that was nearest to the community. Now, so the tool cannot take that into account because you cannot measure exactly where the bridges are and where the community centers are from the satellite data. But what you could do is collect information from the local people themselves, because the tool actually allows you to do that. It allows you to collect economic information, quantitative information, and in future iterations of the tool, it would also allow you to collect more qualitative information like this. So stay tuned. Now beyond Nepal, well, the tool uses satellite data that are globally available, so that's a good thing. And the economic and technical parameters, local parameters, can be collected locally thanks to cell phones. But the limited factor is probably the hydrology. So the stream flow models have been designed for the specific hydrology of Nepal. So it's seasonally dry climate, so monsoons, no snow, and there needs to be some data on stream flows in nearby basins. So any place that has monsoon and that doesn't have snow and that have some gauges could also work as well. All right, so that was it. That was my presentation. Please do get in touch. So my email is right here, marc.f.muller@gmail.com. I have my personal webpage with more details on this research and other research that I'm doing on wider resources. And there is, of course, the online tool. So the way you could actually access the tool that I demoed here is by clicking mfmul.shinyapps.io /MHPOWER. Okay, so that was it. Thanks again for having me. Please feel free to contact me. I'd love to have some feedback and to start a conversation. Bye-bye.